And we are off. All right, again, welcome to the SMOL Brunch reading event, co-chaired by TNBBC Publicity and Alternating Current Press. And we are off and running. Cameron is going to be our first reader. Cameron MacKenzie's work has appeared in Plume, Cut Bank, and the Michigan Quarterly Review, among other places. His novel, The Beginning of His Excellent and Eventful Career, was called Poignant, Brutal, and Beautiful by Kirkus Reviews and Visionary by Rain Taxi. His collection of short stories, River Weather, is just out from Alternating Current Press. Take it over, Cameron.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Lori, for setting this up. I'm excited to be able to do this. I'm also excited to be able to kick this off and to read for you guys. My story, my collection of stories is called River Weather. And a lot of these stories are about growing up in Northern Virginia in the 90s and early aughts, Loudoun County, Fairfax County. It was a strange place then. It remains a strange place now. It's sort of a fascinating collision of money and race and class. When I started writing stories about things that had happened to me, I realized that I was sort of tapping into something unique that other people weren't necessarily doing. So I'm going to read this story. This book's got some long stories, some flash fiction. I'm going to read one piece of flash and then probably one thing about 3 or 4 pages long. And this one's called Scenarios. It's the first story in the book, and I think it's probably a good one to kick off a reading like this. This is Scenarios. When I was in 7th grade or thereabouts, I had a suicide scenario, the particulars of it indicative of the age and time. My plan was, so I would tell friends after school by the bike path, to strap a large speaker to my chest connected to a Walkman in my pocket and jump out of a plane. On the way down, as I tore through the clouds, I'd play Fade to Black from Metallica's Ride the Lightning album. My plan generally earned appreciative nods from all around. It would kick off interesting debates, such as whether Fade to Black, with its subdued opening and almost 7-minute runtime, was really the best song to play when jumping out of a plane to one's death. Point taken. We decided I'd have to start the song about 3 minutes and 15 seconds in to reach maximum intensity before impact. The other principal objection concerned the impact itself. Wouldn't it be better, my friend Jerry suggested, to shoot yourself in the head before you hit the ground? While some argued that the pain associated with either situation would be negligible, we did find some aesthetic appeal in holding a revolver for this final wingless flight into the unknown. Whether I would have gotten the pistol to my head in time or whether I would have even chosen to use it after everything else remains an unanswered question. And then there was the possibility put forward by always conscientious Scott, aspiring physicist Scott, that I might not be able to hear Metallica properly at that altitude and speed, what with the wind in my ears and the behavior of sound waves. Jerry objected. The song's not for him, he said. It's for the people on the ground. I hadn't considered this, but immediately adopted it, nodding sagely and smiling at those in the circle who'd gathered around to listen. All right, the next one is called Coyotes. My friend recently came back from a trip to LA where he stayed in a house with a deaf and blind dog. They called the dog Roomba because it roamed through the place, bumping into things and scarfing up food. It was old but not tired and had settled into a steady rhythm of life that it seemed it could sustain indefinitely. But my friend wanted to tell me about the dog so he could actually tell me about coyotes. The coyotes roamed the edges of the neighborhood at dawn and dusk, big-eared, serene, and drawn tight as bowstrings. Coyotes love to trick domestic dogs, to play with them and draw them away from their yards and out into the hills where the pack can turn on them, kill them, and eat them. From this time-tested game, Roomba was immune, thanks precisely to his handicaps. So at 6 or so every afternoon, he'd patrol the fenced-in backyard with his nose to the ground, blissfully unaware of the coyotes darting in and out of the brush on the other side. I have to imagine those animals were curious, perhaps even frustrated, that their natural charisma, their superior athleticism and street smarts and dark and exotic drawl of the wild had absolutely no effect on the snuffling trash compactor who labored diligently just feet away. I don't know about LA, but when I lived in San Francisco, I used to run out in the Presidio by the Golden Gate Bridge. It's all pine trees and crumbling cliffs dropping off into the pounding sea. And as the park is generally empty, it was a runner's dream. There's wide honey golden routes that run you past the main attractions, and then narrower paths out to wilder places, to beaches you wouldn't otherwise know existed, to unannounced art installations in the woods, to old bunkers and rusting ballistic missile sites and radar towers surrounded by barbed wire, gray paint peeling in the wind. I once found myself down one of these side paths that then opened up into another and another until after a while the track was just about as wild as my own foot and nearly overgrown. The further I ran back into a grove of eucalyptus, the more I wondered if I wasn't on some sort of water runoff or deer path, and soon I found myself in a part of the park I'd never been in before. The dry leaves of the high grass rattled against one another, and as I came to a clearing, no underbrush, no scrub, here the trail petered out completely before a circle of what could only be described as beds, as worn indentations in the grass arranged in a rough half circle before me, each one about 3 feet long. They looked like little nests. I wanted to bend down and touch one, just brush it with my fingers. But I knew it was better to keep my feet, better to keep my hands free and my legs beneath me, just in case they should decide against their nature, but still, just in case they should choose to come at me all at once. Coyotes come across the Golden Gate Bridge at night, lured by the smells of the city, but they're not the only ones. They've got cameras on the thing, so they can tell you got possums and raccoons and skunks and deer and snakes. But it's not at all unusual for mountain lions to pop over at night for a dumpster dive, nap in the park for the daylight hours, and then head back over after the sun goes down. Roomba's limitations saved his life on a regular basis, but the local coyotes weren't so easily dissuaded. They had watched their prey and learned its habits and had taken to killing squirrels and mice and hanging bits of the carcass on the fence for Roomba to find. The owner had seen the meat himself, pink and bloody and flecked with bits of bone, woven into the black chain link like a prank. God knows how they get that crap into the fence, the guy said. But once those fuckers set their mind to something, they tend to find a way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cameron. All right, I have somebody in the waiting room I'm going to admit real quick. And then we will move on to our next reader. So our next reader is Sara. Sara Rauch is the author of What Shines From It, Stories, and the book-length essay XO. Her prose has appeared in Paranoid Tree, Apt, Hobart, Split Lip, Paper Darts, and more. She lives in Massachusetts with her family. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori and Leah, for having me. Leah published my first book, What Shines From It, but I'm actually going to read from my second book, XO, today. I've worked with Lori for both books. XO will be out next month with autofocus. And I'm going to read you guys two short scenes from mid-narrative. It'll become fairly obvious what's happening as I go. All right. The next afternoon, he met me inside the dunes, concealed from the hotels and promenade's view, the heavy gray sky draped around us. We walked north, away from the lives we'd flown in from, and it was so easy, supercharged by dopamine and enabled by solitude, to the edge of the world. This day, the edge of the world was an estuary where the river that flowed through the town ran headlong into the sea. Here, where gulls feed and ghost shrimp burrow, where the water is neither fresh nor salt, we stopped and stood, bodies pressed ankle to thigh to hip to hand to shoulder. Beneath layers of jean and cotton and fleece and Omnitech nylon, my skin ached for his. All around us, life adapted and thrived. I could not tell if the tide was in or out. Our hands entangled, I told him what I'd told myself. I promised I'd be good. He closed his eyes against the mist and said, I promised that too. We didn't kiss then. We were once again, by common moral definition, good. No lines were crossed, no boundaries breached. And yet, what runner wouldn't understand this as a warm-up? What sinner wouldn't recognize the deal struck? Our longing thickened and sparkled as we walked back, and though I left him at a cross street, a block before the hotel, so no one might spy us together, and though I walked with a straight spine, the feral part of me was taking a long, deep breath, poised to spring. There is a poignant intimacy that occurs during an affair, Almost anyone can recognize the seduction of forbidden love, pinked skin and rippled goose flesh, shared secrets and whispers, that slight hitch each time the other enters the room. There is the adrenaline of the secret, the heart hammering and the hope, the just this once and the again. How much is too much, you might ask, and when do we stop? There is no answer. The night he touched my distended belly after I jokingly confessed to eating the world's biggest Reuben for dinner, I went back to my hotel room feeling full and perhaps a bit self-satisfied. I would live up to my vow. I would. We'd crossed the halfway point. Piper had successfully landed on the other side of the Atlantic. This was as far apart as we'd ever been, and I was here, upholding my promise. I changed into my pajamas and washed my face, and it was close to midnight when I checked my email. There was one from him. I can't help but think, what if we just had one night together? A slow heat spread through me. I could say yes, I could say no, I could say nothing. He was surrendering now and passing the power of decision to me. Which way would I run? No matter how well considered, no matter how heart-centered my decision, it is not easy to allow for the truth of our affair's expression, for my clarity of spirit in this moment. What of Piper? What of Willa? Where was my loving kindness, you will want to know? Where were my morals? When an orb spider begins building a web, it pulls silk from a gland with its fourth leg. Using its opposite fourth leg, it produces several more silk strands, creating a balloon-like structure that attaches to the original strand. And then it waits. Eventually, a breeze comes along and catches the balloon, carrying that long line of silk to a nearby branch. The spider can feel the connection, and after a few tugs to assess the strength of the snag, it lays down more silk and moves off toward another end point. The spider might do this up to 20 times, but it only needs 7 true attachments. After, as I find on the Smithsonian website, you no longer need to touch the ground, leaves, twigs, anything. You are in your own, arguably solipsistic world. I hit reply. I've been wondering the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. That was beautiful. All right. Our next reader is Jayne. Jayne Martin is a Pushcart Best Small Fictions and Best Micro Fictions nominee and a recipient of Vestal Review's Vera Award. Her collection of microfiction, Tender Cuts, is available from Vine Leaves Press. Just released from Whiskey Tick Books, her new book is The Daddy Chronicles, Memoir of a Fatherless Daughter. She lives in California, but dreams of living in Paris. Jayne, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, Paris. I'm going to read from a memoir in Flash, The Daddy Chronicles. And one of the things I learned when I was writing it and reading other people's stories is that 1 out of 3 women identify as fatherless. And I found that to be a staggering figure. So writing this book made me feel less alone, and I hope it will have the same effect on other women. So I'll start with the prologue. Ode to the Lone Sperm. Eager little swimmer, perhaps my competitive nature comes from you, who didn't get the memo that fertilization was not my father's intent. Content as he was to have my mother all to himself, but you failed to notice your brethren's sperm treading water, not even trying to tell you to ease up, little fella. This guy's just going through the motions where emotions would never bloom. And in your haste to win the race, a child growing in the shadow of his withholding, a child always wondering why. This is called First Love. The baby sticks her chubby little arm through the bars of the playpen and squeals, "Look at me." The father's eyes stay intent on the television. The baby hoists herself up on tiptoes for the first time. Surprised and delighted with this new skill, she giggles and squeals. Look at me. The father gives her only a brief glance. The baby reaches out with both arms, but as soon as she does, she loses her balance and falls on her behind. She howls, her cheeks crimson, awash in tears. The father turns up the sound on the television until it drowns out her cries. Pinball. The child falls asleep to the foghorns of San Francisco, awakens to rain on the rooftop in Portland, snow on the ground in Bozeman, the high desert heat of Carson City, a pinball bouncing from paddle to paddle at the hands of others. The landscapes blur as the train, the bus, the car rolls by. Glimpses of homes and families that are never her own, as her mother attempts another reconciliation with her wandering father. Alone in one more strange bed, the baby doll she has named for herself held tightly to her chest, she calls out, "Mommy?" Her bare feet pat their way along the wooden floor, down a hallway to a closed door. She stretches upward to the doorknob. Its cold steel fills her tiny palm. The door creaks open into a narrow, dimly lit room. Against the wall to her left is a single metal frame bed where her father lies facing away, her mother's arms wrapped tightly around his bare shoulders. He turns and looks down at her, then back at her mother. "Get her out of here," he says. Tilt. And then he is gone. When Daddy leaves us for the last time, he wears a blue pinstripe suit with a freshly pressed handkerchief in his chest pocket, a fedora hat, and black Oxfords that shine like new pennies. Tall and oh so handsome, he looks just like one of those movie stars that smile out from the covers of the magazines Mommy keeps on her vanity. My small hands press against the window. I draw hard with my finger in the circle of my breath as I watch him carry his suitcase across the busy street, growing smaller with each step he takes away from us. The bell of a cable car rings out as it passes by, and then he is gone, never having turned, never seeing me still waving long after he disappears. My heart melts and slides down the glass. For weeks after that, I still ask, when is Daddy coming home? He'd left us before, left and came back, left and came back. Upon each return, I would run into his arms, his embrace short and stiff, but enough for me to breathe in his scent, cloves and pine, capturing it in my memory like a firefly in a mason jar. "You knew he wasn't a family man when you married him," my grandmother says to my mother, but she's looking at me. And though I don't know what family man means, I see Mommy turn her head to hide her tears. "When Daddy comes back, I'll be such a good girl, I say. My tummy starts to hurt, and I crawl up into Daddy's chair, my bare legs sticking to the leather, my tiny bottom trying to fill the space left by his, and wonder what I could have done to make him stay. Just like family. After bouncing from relative to relative, it's just Mommy and me. The morning sun warms our one-bedroom apartment where Mommy has put up curtains, white with daisies, embroidered along the edges like those I picked from gardens. He loves me not. For the first time, I make friends. Every day after school, I go play with Franny. Her large stone and brick house has kids hollering, running around, and hanging out of every window. There's always a big pitcher of Kool-Aid in the refrigerator. I can help myself like I'm one of the family, and no one ever asks where my dad is. Franny is the youngest. She has 6 older brothers and sisters, and another baby is on the way. There's always another one. They're Catholic, and now so am I, even though I don't really know what that means. Sometimes Franny still sucks her thumb. We dig a hole in the corner of the backyard. All the way to China, we shout. We climb a tree, sit on the lowest branch, sucking on pixie sticks. We talk about the movie stars we will marry, our houses next door to each other. Franny wants 4 kids. I don't want any. There are tons of hiding places, and hide and seek goes on for hours. Curled in the back of her parents' closet, I slip my feet inside her dad's slippers. I imagine never being found. Franny's mom telling mine, I'm sorry, we looked and looked. And I'm going to skip ahead a few years and read the last one. At the stroke of midnight. In my fantasies, my father is Prince Charming, Superman, as handsome as James Bond, as powerful as the president. It's my 14th birthday, and we're going to go see him. Mom buys me a new dress, black chiffon. It's too old for me, but she doesn't say no. She never says no. I line my eyes and paint my lips. I wind my hair into a French twist so I look grown up. When Daddy left us, I was just a little girl, and my mommy was crying, and my grandmother was saying, you knew he wasn't a family man when you married him. I look in the mirror. The little girl stares back. Mom and I drive to the nearby town where he lives. We park in front of a Payless shoe store wedged between a dry cleaner's and a nail salon. What are we doing? I ask. Inside, my mother's hand is on my back, gently pushing me toward a man who is thin and balding and on his knees, putting a shoe to the foot of a woman seated. He sees us in the doorway and rises. And though nothing like my dreams, I still want to run into his arms, but they never open. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayne. That was lovely. And just in case you guys are not checking the chat when you're done reading, you should, because you're getting some lovely comments in there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for coming.
Yeah. All right, time for our next reader and our co-host for this event, Leah Angstman. Leah is the author of the historical novel of 17th century New England, Out Front the Following Sea, from Regal House. The novel of the French Revolution, Falcon in the Dive, is forthcoming from Regal House in spring 2024. And the collection of short histories, Shoot the Horses First, forthcoming from Current Punk Press in February 2023. She serves as editor-in-chief of Alternating Current Press and The Coil online magazine, and her work has appeared in numerous journals, including Publishers Weekly, Los Angeles Review of Books, and the Nashville Review. You can find her at leahangstman.com. Leah, go girl.
Woo! All right, so mine is a novel. It's Out Front the Following Sea, as she introduced. A little harder to read segments than short stories, but I picked out this section that I think should be pretty kind of indicative of what the book is about and what the protagonist is like. So what you need to know for this is that it's 1689. The protagonist is 16-year-old Ruth, who has been accused of witchcraft. We don't yet know why at this point in the story, but the town loathes her and they're coming to get her. Before dusk fell, she saw the torches. The town was restless, awakening with the thaw and the coming new year, and with the planting of the next crops, they were anxious to be rid of Ruth's curses over them. 2 silver serving dishes, a set of 4 pewter spoons, some imported beads, and 6 full bolts of cloth. This would have to do. She slammed the lid of her trunk and towed it, partially bolstered by a piece of wood, out the back door. It was a slow limp to the stable, but when she got there, she flung the door wide and battled with the hanging wooden sled to shake it loose from the pile of stacked metal prods, ropes, and tools that had once belonged to her dead father. She squatted to lever the trunk onto the sled. She could make it the long way to the harbor, in and out of the woods at the foot of the marsh. They'd never see her, she reasoned. But then on the path in from town came that sudden snap of iron and a crack, a human howl akin to a wolf's, and she knew exactly where they were. She'd set those iron traps. The lights of torches came around the far side of the house, and she hunkered down and jerked the sled forward into the trees behind the stable. Emptied and fatigued, she eventually looked toward the harbor to see that she'd only made it a quarter of the way across the meadow, sheltered by trees. She could still go back. The house was closer. But as she watched it, she saw those figures, the black smoke that rose from somewhere near them, shadows attached to angered voices. Animals rustled in the woods at that scent of fire, acrid, overmolded loaf mixed with the black char that burns at the bottom of a flat pan, sour at the back of the nose. She pressed on toward the shore, finally arriving in a blur of paradoxical fury and weakness at the far corner of the harbor. She panted and stepped to the counter of a makeshift crude customs house. One immobile man leaned over a ledger, and Ruth approached him. "I need to pay my passage." "To where?" he replied. He couldn't take his eyes from his ledger. "To anywhere." He looked up. "Alone?" "Aye." She stared at him, and he stared back. Is that the wrong answer?" No, then, I won't be traveling alone." "Who'll be traveling with you?" "My trunk." The teller did not relax his face. "There's no passenger ships until the waters break." How long? The waters had broken, she knew it. Small rowboats were already starting adrift. "Maybe 2-3 weeks. Is a hard winter, so maybe a month." "No, that won't do. I can't wait that long." "I got nothing for you." The teller stopped looking at her. "Well, what's that list on your ledger?" she said. "A list of ships due for arrival." "Well, put me on one. I got payment, 2 silver dishes. There's no ships." "God's teeth, I see them," Ruth shouted. "On your list, I see them." He glared at her and would have walked away if such movement had been physically possible. Only freight can guarantee to break through the waters in the coming week. Freight, then. You can't go on a cargo catch without the captain's permission. But what if we don't tell the captain? Why would I not tell him? Because you're a keen fellow taking pity on a lone traveling female? No one takes pity on you, Mistress Minor. She paused. Her reputation had preceded her. Well, bribery then? Certainly not. Well, then how about simply to get rid of me? I'm not leaving until I have a ship. There's no ships. Ruth looked at his scribbled upside down ledger. Sparrow. Her passenger slot is filled. She's only freight now. Well, it just so happens that I will take freight. She glanced again at his list, straining to see the next ship name. Her pulse quickened. It was Owen's ship. Primrose. Filled. But there's room for freight? He conceded with satisfaction. Plenty of room for freight, yes. Well, God's teeth! Ruth slammed a fist down on the counter and grabbed the teller by the collar, pulling him against the desktop. I'll curse you to contract a deadly plague from hidden fleas in a cargo of fabrics that will wipe out your entire household and half this town and cause your children to die such horrible deaths that they'll be— Stop! He wrenched free and pulled back. Don't you want me to leave this town? By all the might of God, yes. She smacked her pointer finger down on the ledger. Freight. Freight, he repeated and penciled her in. She slid the payment bundle of fabric rolled goods toward him. Fret not, she said. There's no fleas.
Thank you, Leah. I love the voices you give your characters, by the way. And that Ruth is something else, isn't she? All right. Thank you so much, Leah. Our next reader is Tyler Friend. Tyler is a poet and designer who was grown and is still growing in Tennessee. Their poetry has appeared in Tin House, Hobart, Hunger Mountain, and elsewhere. Tyler's chapbook Bunker is available in Third Man Books Literarium vending machine in the London store. Him or Her or Whatever, out now from Alternating Current Press, is their first full-length collection. Tyler, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's read so far. This is great. So most of my poems are really short, but I'm going to try to read a longer one. So we'll see how that goes. So this is called Directions to Hear. Ride on birdseed-fed bears and bees' knees over overgrown dirt bike paths, through ferned forests with bruised bottles, through holes in ginkgo leaves, in shadows, through Spanish tiled sewers, past already burnt wood, dark and shiny. Read the off-trail braille, look into the eyes of birch trees, share your honey with me and float away lazily. Ride on midlife crisis bicycles and imaginary friends, over the years and through inherited memory, through sage stillness and layers of rust dust. Share your sports bras, wrap yourselves up on shipping pallets, a valet ballet, like a tumbleweed gone to sea, like loose tongues panting, wind, lipid-soluble molecules jeopardizing the food placed on death's metal plates. Macerate yourself in honey. Purr your mind into incoherent sounds, fresh and fermented, moonshine and slant rhyme. Place candles, cut carnations, and unnecessary body parts. Pour in women's waters and bees' waters. You'll need a guacamole philosophy and lavender lemonade, twin time, sweet tea sunshine, cheer wine, and we're fine. Radicalism is sexy. We're not mathematicians here. Ride on little apricot lambs through new mountains with stuffy noses. Search for something resembling flannel in red dirt. It's been there since before the invention of orange. I think that's where you got your hair. That yellow scarf, those stinging eyes, also red and rotting. How can decomposition be so dry? Hold your throat, your eager calves. Look at the mountains. Just look at them. They are so beautiful. Even the Sphinx is just a pile of rocks sometimes. Maybe staying stationary is what makes you a monument. Allow yourself to be stupidly in love with the world. Listen to shrunken heads and talking heads. Let her hug your face and breathe in too much of her. Hear the word apricot and die a little bit. Just a little bit more than you usually die in a matter of moments. Go to the bar and don't break up with anyone. Listen to gloriously mediocre bluegrass and poke plump seams. Get lost in forest fool hair, panties stained blue from new jeans and friction. Feed the bees your sweat and secretions and swallow another stone. Yeah, we're making progress. Exchange heart-shaped stones and trust that your secret will be safe. It'll be safe with me. With me, a heart-shaped stone is never just a stone, and nothing is exactly like it really is. I'm sure I saw you smirk during the ceremony, but that's okay too. Ceremony always feels a little silly. Notice the similarity between Volvo and vulva. Get in. Tell me about eating hearts and the size of rats and anything else you can think of to get me to vomit up some silly smug words like, I like you, except you don't. Forget about Fight Club. Let's form a cry club. Hold each other in one big jerking catharsis in the back of a minivan. In the middle of a thunderstorm, at the drive-in, Casper's playing. If poems need an argument, my argument is that I love you. And that's in couplets. I don't know why that matters to me.
Thank you so much, Tyler. That's the first time I've heard your work. I really liked it. Thank you. All right, our next reader is Ryan Ridge. Ryan is the author of 4 chapbooks as well as 5 books, including most recently the story collection New Bad News from Saraband Books 2020. He's received the Italio I'm not going to say this correctly, Italo Calvino Prize in Fabulous Fiction, the Linda Berkheimer Prize in Kentucky Literature, and the Kentucky Writers Fellowship for Innovative Writing from the Baltic Writing Residency. His work has been featured in the American Book Review, Denver Quarterly, Passages North, Post Road, Salt Hill, Santa Monica Review, and Southwest Review, among other outlets. A graduate of the University of Louisville and the MFA programs in writing at UC Irvine. He is the assistant professor at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah, where he co-directs the creative writing program. In addition to his work as a writer and teacher, he edits the literary magazine Juked. He lives in Salt Lake City with the writer Ashley Farmer and plays bass in the Snarlin' Yarns. Ryan, you're up.
Hey, it's great to be here. I wish we could do this every Saturday. It's a great way to start the day. So thanks so much, Leah, and thank you, Laurie too. So, my latest book is Ox from Alternating Current, and these are visual poems. So I think I'm just going to read from a new project. And this project's kind of ongoing, and it's co-written with Mel Bosworth. And it's called The Weird Years. So I'm just going to read a few short pieces that are about humans and animals and the human animal. So this first one's about cats. In the morning, the cats ruled until noon. After breakfast, they demanded more breakfast. After more breakfast, they demanded more breakfast. After more and more breakfast, they demanded milk. After milk, they demanded more milk. After more and more milk, they demanded blood. After blood, they demanded more blood. After more and more blood, we knew we needed to organize if we wanted to survive. 6 shots, 9 lives, the math, it wasn't on our side. Just then, church bells beat on our eardrums. It was high noon. We were on the lawn with our pistols drawn when a herald on a mountain bike pedaled past fast. Truce, he screamed, to get the handlebars. We watched his breath turn into smoke. We've reached a truce. What kind of truce, we said. The internet, he said. He hit the handlebars for emphasis. We've given the cats the internet. It's theirs. It's not ours anymore. From here on out, we're living in the real world again. We're reading newspapers, writing letters, renting DVDs, and walking into banks. And that was that. That afternoon, a flying saucer eviscerated City Hall. We had to wait until the next morning to read about it. And this next one is going to be about birds. It's called The Morning the Songbirds Changed Their Tunes. You straighten your chair and a glob of oatmeal dropped out of your mouth and back into the bowl. And I wondered whether you were going to spoon that glob back into your mouth or whether you were going to sit there staring at the bowl. You stared at the bowl. I stared at you. You looked at the bowl and you looked like something was about to happen. You looked like something was happening. I waited for something to happen. Nothing happened. Then the following. Through the blinds, a horizontal blade of light bisected your face and you said, "Why do I hear John Denver?" You said, "Sweet Surrender. I'm hearing the melody of Sweet Surrender. Are you not hearing the melody of Sweet Surrender?" You said, "Strike that. It isn't Sweet Surrender. It's Rocky Mountain High. I'm distinctly hearing the melody from Rocky Mountain High. Are you not also hearing the melody from Rocky Mountain High? Am I high? What's in this oatmeal? This is freaky. Now I'm hearing Country Roads. Is that what that song's called? Country Roads? Or is it called Take Me Home, or is it called Take Me Home, Country Roads? Whatever it's called, I'm hearing that. Do you hear it? Do you not hear Country Roads or Take Me Home or Take Me Home, Country Roads, whatever the hell that's called? Do you hear it? Do you? No, I said, listening. I'm hearing Creedence. It's unmistakably Creedence, late Creedence, early 70s Creedence, deep cuts, long as I can see the light. And it's funny because, I can see the light right now at this very moment. There's a slice of sunlight illuminating your forehead. You said, "What's happening here?" I said, "I didn't know. I didn't understand. You didn't understand either. It was sunny. I went outside to investigate. Obviously, it was loud outside. We traced the amplified trail of melodies to a group of tanagers on top of a Marshall stack. A microphone plugged into the speaker hissed. A quartet of birds leaned into the mic and they launched into the birds. They did 8 Miles High. They did Aerosmith's Walk This Way. We walked closer. We listened, amazed. You said, these songbirds sure have changed their tunes this morning. I know, I said. They're really into some deep cuts from the 70s. I dig it. I flicked my bic and held it aloft. For an encore, they played Don't Fear the Reaper, and they flew away. We watched them flying high into the sky and toward Taos. In a nearby tree, a murder of crows laughed their asses off. They were laughing at us. We were certain of it. We hustled inside, locked the doors, shut the blinds, and turned out the lights. Now, this last one's about deer, and it's very short. It's called The Day the Deer Attacked Back. Clyde looked through his scope. Something ain't right, he said. Tell me more, I said. He said, we were surrounded. I said, by whom? He said, by them. I looked to the left, deer. I looked to the right, deer. I looked ahead, deer. I looked behind, deer. I felt the ground moving beneath us, tunneling deer. Shadows slipped across our backs, flying deer. Crazy thoughts raced through my mind, psychic deer. Panic filled my heart, deer fear. I said, pass me a beer. I fight better when I'm drunk. Clyde handed me a cold one. I set down my rifle and shotgunned the beer. Then we were on our feet, back to back, and it was fists versus hooves, and we embarrassed ourselves quickly.
Thank you, Ryan. That was hilarious. Absolute riot. I loved it. Loved it. All right. Next reader, we have Jayne Michalski. Jayne is the author of 3 novels, 3 short story collections, and a couplet of novellas. Her latest novel, You'll Be Fine, was a 2021 BuzzFeed Best Small Press Book and was selected as one of the best books we've read this year by Independent Press Review. In fall 2022, Braddock Avenue Books will release her short story collection, The Company of Strangers. She's the editor of the online literary weekly JMWW and lives in Southern California, although she will always be a Baltimore girl by heart. Jayne, take it away.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everybody. This has been great. Yeah, I am going to read a short story from my collection coming out this fall from Braddock Avenue Books. This story is called The Loneliest Creature. You don't really need to know anything about it, but I will give you a small detail anyway. I wrote it after I watched this children's St. Jude's Hospital commercial, and I thought I was going to write this Lori Moore inspired, the people here are the only people everywhere, that kind of story, And you know what? I didn't. So this is what I wrote instead. I'm going to try and finish it all. If not, I'll just stop. Thank you for humoring our son. He's a very inquisitive boy and knows a lot for his age. Other boys will astonish you or perhaps bore you with their encyclopedic knowledge of Minecraft or Tyrannosaurus Rex, but our son will tell you about Frank Hayes, the jockey who died of a heart attack mid-race at Belmont Park, but still won because his body stayed in the saddle until man and horse crossed the finish line. I know you were about to visit your mother, but our son is not finished telling you about the whale who has been without a mate for over 20 years because his mating call is so different from the other whales that no one responds to him. I bet he's the loneliest creature on earth. Our son widens his eyes as he speaks to you. And yes, your mother is waiting on the 5th floor. So thank you for lingering, telling him he's a smart boy, smiling just as widely as he is staring, even though you feel sorry for him, and maybe hug your own kids a little tighter or order the bloomin' onion loaf that they always whine for at the restaurant, but that you never get because of triglycerides and all. But now that you've seen our son, you think, hell, they'll only live once. He's no idiot savant or anything like that. There's really a quite banal explanation for his repository of trivia. Last year, at his annual checkup, one of us forgot to bring the tablet, the one with all the games on it, and panicked. We went to the gift shop looking for a children's book and returned with a copy of Weird and Amazing Facts. It seemed harmless with the blue monkey and red eyes on the cover. Our son became so engrossed, he read it through his checkup, everything, didn't even notice. We've since bought the full set. Did you know that there are 8? Our son has read them cover to cover while waiting the publication of volume 9. Yes, we checked. He's memorized 287 weird facts, like the reindeer that spent 6 weeks on the British submarine HMS Trident during World War II, or Giethoorn, the village in the Netherlands with no roads, only canals and footbridges. Now, when we are waiting for the doctor, he will entertain the other patients. At first, it made them less anxious of their own ailments, but after a while, they began to sit on the other side of the waiting room. Not because of our son's retelling of the full gates of Troublesome Creek, a family in Kentucky who had blue skin from a rare genetic condition that they inbred into their family tree, but because they were worried about contagion. We've been assured this is not an issue, the contagion. Anyway, we touch him all the time and are none the worse for wear. It is more dangerous for him than us. Right after the checkup, we knew something wasn't right. We'd only grabbed his earlobe between our fingers and tugged at it playfully. They didn't believe us in the emergency department, called in Child Protective Services, even accused us of devil worship. Why the hell would we cut it off? We explained over and over. We're telling you, it just came off. And when the tip of his pinky fell off, right there in front of Child Protective Services, only then did they believe us. It sounds like one of those things in those books of his you say to each other. Never to us, though, although we know you're thinking it. Maybe you go home and Google search body parts fell off, or flipper for hand, or purple, blue, green skin, and you finally learn that no, leprosy doesn't cause body parts to fall off, but maybe our boy does have that methylmogloglioma thing. But that doesn't explain the red pupils and the sloughing, whole sheets of it left behind on the examination table or in the pool. Back we went to places like that, back before the homeschooling. And what a trooper he is, you add, to whoever it is you're talking to, your husband, your wife, your therapist, although we agree, he's an inspiration to us all. That's not quite true. We are not inspired by what's happening. We're terrified. And we're not terrified, we're angry, especially when our little boy caught us crying in the bedroom a few months ago. We were holding his baby picture when he was still himself. And he proceeded to tell us that icebergs make a distinctive fizzing sound when they melt, called the Bergy Seltzer. Will you just be quiet, quiet, quiet for once? We shook him. Didn't he have any idea how hard this was on all of us? And we felt our fingers sink into his skin, right to the bone, like we were squeezing gelatin. That scared us pretty bad. The holes absorbed after a few hours, and the fingerprints, which were, we kid you not, gold, faded after a few days. The people from the government, one of those alphabet organizations, came. Of course, they were careful, mindful of our stresses, talked about finding a cure, but we knew they just wanted to take him to some laboratory and run some blood samples, some tests to culture something. But what? The rest of him? He's already lost, since the pinky, his whole arm and his right foot. His skin, at one point a beautiful aquamarine blue, no filter, is now covered with scales and what appear to be short porcupine-like quills. At least there's no worrying about sinking our hands into his skin anymore. He doesn't seem fazed by these phases. He still talks excitedly about the 9th volume of Weird and Amazing Facts, which should arrive any day now. Until then, he's fond of recounting the laughing epidemic, which is what he tells you when we run into you again outside the elevators. How's your mother, by the way? Who knows why we come here now, merely to document changes without any hope of answers? We were a little worried about the right kneecap. It was as wobbly as a tire with lug nuts loose when we pulled on his sweatpants this morning. As you linger, smiling, trying not to stare at our son's bulbous knuckles as he waves his hands, he tells you that the laughing epidemic happened in Tanzania in 1962 and lasted a year. Thousands of people, in addition to laughing, couldn't stop crying or fainting. They broke out in rashes and severe pain. What was the cause of the epidemic, you ask him? You hold your breath, not because you can't wait for the answer, but because of the smell, like burned flesh, but also strangely licorice that comes off our son and waves. I don't know, he answers and frowns, what passes as a frown, now that his lips have begun to curdle. They never tell you that part. I'm going to stop right there.
Thank you, Jen. That was crazily unsettling, but it was beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, our next reader is Jackson. Jackson Bliss is the winner of 2020 Naomi Press Award in prose and the mixed race HAPA author of Counterfactual Love Stories and Other Experiments, Naomi Press 2021, Amnesia of June Bugs, from 713 Books, 2022, and the speculative fiction hypertext, Duca My Love, 2017. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, Tin House, Plowshares, Guernica, Long Reads, Tri-Quarterly, Columbia Journal, Kenyon Review, Volume 1 Brooklyn, Witness, Fiction, Santa Monica Review, Boston Review, Juked, Quarterly West, Arts and Letters, Joyland, Huffington Post UK, The Daily Dot, and Multi-Ethnic Literature in the US, among others. He is the distinguished visiting writer at Bowling Green State University and lives in LA with his wife and their 2 fashionably dressed dogs. You can follow him on Twitter and IG at Jackson Bliss. Jackson, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Lori and Leah, for putting this amazing venue together. There's an obscenity of riches here, I feel, with all the talent. So it's a joy and an honor to be here with all of you. I'm just going to read a part from my upcoming experimental memoir, Dream Pop Origami. This memoir is basically choose your own memoir. You read a lyric essay and then you get to pick where you go from there for every single chapter. And I'm just going to read a small portion about my time in West Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer. And it's about the time all the moments in my life where I was basically sort of fighting my own solitude and trying really hard not to be lonely, even though I was like the only American for 80 kilometers or something. So this is just a small excerpt from Liberation from the Luminous Flux. With the exception of the call to prayer battle that took place every morning between the 2 neighborhood mosques, located 20 sandal steps from the compound gate, time wasn't universal, linear, or objective anymore. Without the ringing of cell phones and landlines, without the philosophical delay of mirrors reflecting back my daily existence, without electricity or plumbing, without the chronicle of cable news or the internet, time didn't exist in this village because there was no way to measure it, no way to defy my own sense of time passing. There was no way to track the way time leaked into the cultural groundwater of my consciousness or accelerated into the night sky. Time was just a theorem of the industrialized mind, a useless paradigm invented by the age of automation to replace circadian rhythm with luminous flux. Temporal distortion happened every day in my village, sometimes, especially on the weekends when it rained all day, time disappeared, eroding like the dirt roads to Mali. When time did exist, it existed as a specter, encapsulated on the radio and repeated in Burkinabe idiom, ça va aller, it's going to go. An expression attesting to the permeability and the cyclicity of time, to the redundancy and the continuity of human existence. If time existed here, it existed in the gradations of my own sweat, in the stretched out shadows of my gaunt and damp body, in the purging of precious calories during infinite bike rides to imaginary borders. It existed in the lunar frequencies of milk blue halos on the concrete terrace in my compound. Time was the emotional cycle of one Nick Drake tape. The number of times I asked villagers about their family in Jula and explained the same fucking English grammar to my students in French, or took a bucket bath with a blue plastic cup and baby shampoo, or soaked vegetables in chlorinated water, or the number of times I forgot to take my mefloquine to avoid cerebral malaria, the number of times the volcanic sky brought tears to my eyes as I biked through the African bush aimlessly and wiped mango pulp from my chapped lips in the aloe sunset and craved a woman's voice inside my head and craved a woman's smell on my pillowcase and fantasized about air-conditioned cafes in bustling metropolitan cities and prayed for the plum reprieve of twilight every midnight. If time existed in my village, if it was possible for time to exist at all in a village with spotty electricity, broken generators, cassette vendors, and 3-year-old calendars, then it must exist in the biorhythm of the body, in the quotidian arcs of that solar prodigy in the sky, and in the clumsy hand-painted clouds stuck forever, it seemed, in the African horizon like stage props for an undigested paradise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackson. That was lovely. All right, we have Suzi Q up next. And I apologize. She wants to share her screen, and this is the first time I've ever messed with anything like this. So we're going to see if we can pull it off. And if we can't, we can't. So I'll do her intro first. So Suzi Q. Smith is an award-winning artist, activist, and educator who lives in Denver, Colorado. Her poems have appeared in Union Station Magazine, Suspect Press, La Palabra, Muzzle Magazine, The Pedestal, The Los Angeles Journal, Denver Syntax, Word is Bond, The Perlata Press, Yellow Chair Review, and in the anthologies, The Mutiny Info Reader, Diverse City, His Rib, Anthology of Women, and In Our Own Words. Her chapbook collection of poems, 13 Descansas, was published by Penmanship Books in 2015, and her first full-length collection, A Gospel of Bones, is available now from Alternating Current Press. Currently, Suzi Q is at work on her next collection while she continues to teach creative writing and cultivate a beautiful life. Suzi, you are up.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you for enabling that screen share option. So, and also thank you for putting all of this together. So Lori and Leah, and thank you to all the readers who have gotten to here today. This is beautiful. So I wanted to share my screen because this is one of my favorite things that I get to do in virtual readings is I can show you what I'm reading as I'm reading it, and particularly when there's a structure at play. So the first poem I wanted to share is called We Pay Cash for Houses. And because it's a contrapuntal, I like to be able to show it as I read it so that you can kind of see the structure because it's still new for a lot of folks. So this is We Pay Cash for Houses, and it's an ode to the city I'm from and the neighborhood I'm from, which is the neighborhood is Park Hill, the city is Denver, Colorado. Front yards with grass, old trees and shiny crab apples. Liquor stores here got bulletproof glass. The churches, tattered lighthouses, hold all our secrets. We lost Martin Luther King Boulevard. We hum our shame in moans. Old spirituals shaped the bricks, hand-me-down houses, delicious trees that gossip over fences. Popeye's chicken, church's chicken, laundromat check cashing payday loans. We who know each other's names and borrowed cups of sugar, $20 until payday, just until we get on our feet. And did we not get on our feet? We made this, all of this, we made it. Fresh cut, clean as first day of school sneakers. Even the mirrors finesse the new banks on the block. Bundles of slow plunder, but the sidewalks ain't cracked no more. The alleyways smooth as untested promise of former corner store seedlings blooming into downward facing dog, and parks that unwelcome children. Bike lanes and boutique wine bars or family friendly microbreweries. Hear all the scents and sounds conspiring, flooding to the teeth in whispered howls, drowning in hissed welcomes adrift the taunting memory of ground, air, made fat and wet with our breath. For you, for you. Front yards with grass, fresh cut. Old trees and shiny crab apples, clean as first day of school sneakers. Liquor stores here got bulletproof glass. Even the mirrors finesse the churches, tattered lighthouses. The new banks on the block hold all our secrets, bundles of slow plunder. We lost Martin Luther King Boulevard, but the sidewalks ain't cracked no more. We hum our shame in moans, the alleyways smooth as untested promise. Old spirituals shape the bricks of former corner store seedlings. Hand-me-down houses blooming into downward-facing dog, delicious trees that gossip over fences and parks that unwelcome children. Popeye's chicken, church's chicken, bike lanes and boutique wine bars, laundromat, check cashing, payday loans, or family-friendly microbreweries. We, who know each other's names, hear all the scents and sounds conspiring, and borrowed cups of sugar flooding to the teeth in whispered howls, $20 until payday, drowning in hissed welcomes just until we get on our feet, adrift the taunting memory of ground. And did we not get on our feet, air, made fat and wet with our breath? We made this, all of this, for you. We made it for you. Thank you. And I'll just share one more poem that I don't need to screen share with, but I like being able to do that one. And for Women's History Month, I thought I would read this poem that is called Homegirl, and both of these are in a Gospel of Bones. Homegirl, noun, 1. A girl or woman from one's own neighborhood or hometown. In my neighborhood, women walk like they are their own favorite songs. The way my beautiful aunties laugh and sway, I am sure the world belongs to the music of their steps. I practice this walk when no one is looking. You ain't grown. I watch the way my grandmother walks to her sister's house at night, carrying a stick for stray dogs, she tells us, or heavy-handed men who refuse to leave, and praying all the way. She tells us to stay together while we wait for her outside. We do. 2, an inner city girl or woman. I am 7, and the boy across the street calls me a homegirl. We both think this is an insult. My sister laughs, head back and throaty, when I come home crying. 3, a girl or woman who is a friend. In middle school, my best friend's father says that everything north of a certain avenue where my house is a ghetto and should be burned to the ground. She and I argue about whether or not her father is racist. I take everything the wrong way. 4, see around the way girl. Lisa, Angela, Pamela, Renee. LL Cool J praises the girls with bamboo earrings and shining lip gloss. My grandmother won't let me pierce my ears, says marking up their bodies is the first sign that people are separating themselves from God. I'm tucking hand-me-down bell bottoms into my socks and praying no one sees. 5, a compound word made from home and girl. Don't nobody like you anyway, Myron? My throat curling into a fist, my legs pumping high noon. I swing in a furious tornado at the boy who pushed me off my bike, the roar and thrum of my block boiling, beating him into a wall of rose bushes. I bet he still remembers my name. I hope he still feels a sting every time he balls a fist. 6, a female member of a peer group or gang. My homegirl tells me about a man breaking into her house freshly after her divorce when her children were little and tucked into their beds. She held the man at gunpoint at her kitchen table, brewed a pot of coffee while they waited for police. 7, plural noun, homegirls. My homegirls and I say homegirl like it belongs to us, like an invention or inheritance. Either way, we've had it since like 85 when we brought it with us. A man broke my heart and my homegirl hexed his ass in a text message. Ain't heard from him again. A man broke my homegirl's heart and I swallowed his name. Ain't heard from him again. My homegirl made a fire in the backyard and we threw our dead into it. We survived. My homegirls and I, you got to get through me first. My homegirls and I, how I got over. every other name too toothless to pass down to our daughters, who will carry the sticks, the crayons, the fires, the gloss, the fists, the roses, the guns, the coffee, the men, the keys, the babies, the medicine, the front doors, the back doors, the windows, the words, each other, each other, each other, each other. Thank you.
Suzi, that was amazing. And I'm glad I figured out how to do the screen share because I think that really added to the whole experience. That was gorgeous. Thank you. All right, we are on the home stretch now. We have David Leo Rice closing things up for us. David Leo Rice is a writer and animator living in New York City. He is also the author of the novels A Room in Dodge City, The Porn Me Trinity, and Angel House, one of Dennis Cooper's favorite books of 2019. David's debut short story collection, Drifter, was released in mid-2021, and his next novel, The New House, is forthcoming in 2022. He's online at raviddice.com. David, take us home.
All right, I'll try. Yeah, thanks everyone for having me, and this has been great. They've been really, as all the comments have shown, like everything's been fantastic. So it's been super cool to just listen to everything. Yeah, I want to thank Leah too, who's publishing the Dodge City trilogy. Volume 2 is out now also, and Volume 3 is almost done. It should be out soon. So I'm going to read a little bit from this novel called The New House that's going to come out with Whiskey Tit later this spring. And it's about a family of Jewish outsider artists roaming the American interior in search of the New Jerusalem, which they're convinced exists somewhere. So I'm going to read a little section from the point of view of the son, who's about 12 in this moment, who's just walked in on his parents having sex with these robots that they built because they don't want to have another son like him, but he's afraid that they might end up conceiving a robot, which they do eventually. And he's sort of hanging out with this entity called a Belmer, which is basically a dog that this kind of Nazi gang called the Boys have killed, but he believes he's reanimated it, and it's sort of guiding him toward the New Jerusalem. Okay. It doesn't take much to wake the Belmer. Jacob pulls off the blanket and watches as a cloud of white, wriggling bustle emerges to greet him. It dances across his forearms and onto his shoulders as he reaches down and picks up the creature, hoping to rouse it gently, but now it's wriggling too. So, faster than he'd planned, he finds that he and it are both sauntering across the yard, away from the house and the night crusher, who's waiting for the sunrise when he'll be transported to some other part of the world, where it's still night and people are still sleeping, uncrushed in their beds. Jacob, meanwhile, suspects that he and the Belmer are speeding toward a revelation. He has to run to keep up, the soft hulk of the animal pressed into his side, leaning against him, playfully threatening to knock him down. They run up the street the house is parked on and toward downtown, bypassing the place where his mother turned into the meadow and toward the woods, and don't stop except to pick up a new member of their menagerie, a pigeon crushed under a rock at the corner of his street and Main. Another gift from the boys, he thinks, thrilling at the possibility that they are acting as his assistants. A surge of power passes through him, making his head wobble. I am the master, and they are my apprentices, he declares, somewhere between galvanized and petrified, to hear that his voice still sounds like his father's. He scoops up what's left of the pigeon and shoves it under the Belmer's collar, so that it looks like it's flying with a dog's head for a helmet. He can tell that an old man in a rocking chair on his porch is watching him, his newspaper held low under his eyes like a shoddy mask, but Jacob pays him no heed, inwardly reciting the line his mother taught him about neighbors. Whatever secrets we may have from them, just think of the secrets they have from us. The truth about neighbors, understood yet denied the world over, is that none truly wish to know us, just as we most certainly do not wish to know them. So, with a half-hearted salute in the old man's direction, Jacob gathers up the Belmer and runs on. He nearly flies the rest of the way into town, whipping up the energy that he trusts will guide him to where he's supposed to go, since, he thinks, it connects me to the greats of history. Although at the same time, another voice interrupts, I wish I knew some actual people. This is the kind of thought that marks the line between the end of the night, where nearly anything's possible, and the beginning of the day, where nearly nothing is. He closes his eyes, licks his lips, swallows, and feels the blood clot swim a queasy loop from his throat down to his legs, and then back up to his gut, which he thinks of as a womb when he can feel her in it. Then he looks down and notices that the Belmer has led him to a frog pond. He kneels by the edge to watch the sunrise in the scummy water, searing the lily pads that break up its reflection. Staring at the water with the Belmer resting in the grass beside him, Jacob allows déjà vu to overwhelm his system. It comes fast and consumes everything. A second ago, the specifics of this town felt hazy, but now everything reminds him, on a level so deep it hurts, of everything else. The déjà vu throws out strings that connect everything he sees to everything he thinks, suturing him into the middle of it all, a 12-year-old boy who was somehow also conceived last night, and is somehow also an 80-year-old man, having lived his whole life in this town, waiting for an authentic birth that never came. The strings pull tighter until he can barely breathe. He thinks about Winnicott and the relief of re-entering the holding environment, while at the same time thinking about the snake, about it finally swallowing and digesting him, and in this way making him a permanent part of the house, a notion at once blasphemous and irresistible. The strings continue pulling inward, crushing his ability to conceive of anything beyond what's immediately apparent, so that he can't help but declare, of course this is the town where I belong, where every thought I've ever had belongs, and where whatever I end up doing in the years between now and 80 will be done. And of course this is the ground in which I will one day be planted, the seed of something unimaginably greater. The simplicity of this fact, thus articulated, is so absolute that he exhales and feels the strings light up. So this is it, he pants, the New Jerusalem. And if it isn't, I can make it be, because if I can't, then there's nothing between me and the Tyson meat truck, no place to hide from the fear that life is nothing but loading docks and highway overpasses, cold storage and sides of beef on meat hooks. He exhales again, letting the strangeness of his changed voice expand away from him as he feels the last of the crushing sensation abate with a cathartic squirt. Looking down, he discovers that he's squished a frog in his fist. Opening his fingers to examine its ruined body, he realizes that it was a sacrifice to mark his acceptance of permanent residency in this town, in his ritual expulsion of the last slimy pustules of doubt. Thank you for your service, he whispers. Your death was not in vain. Into the Belmer, he adds, thank you for leading me here. I couldn't have found this place on my own. Getting to his feet, he attaches the frog to the top of the Belmer's collar so that it protrudes like a cock's comb, a warped double of the pigeon below. Stepping back to regard his work, he can't help but admire it. Reinvigorated with pride, he sets out for downtown, ready to meet the morning as someone who's now certain he belongs in it. Up there.
Thank you so much, David. And I want to thank all of our readers today. This has been an absolutely ridiculously fabulous lineup. I enjoyed all of the excerpts. I could not have picked, and I don't think Leah and I could not have picked a better group of authors to kick off SMOLFair. Speaking of SMOLFair, Leah is one of the featured readers at tonight's main event for the SMOLFair reading. That kicks off at 6 o'clock. So we hope that we see all of you guys there. And I hope to see each and every one of you throughout the next week at some of the really cool events that we have. Don't forget to participate in some of the giveaways that we're going to be hosting, in the small press virtual tables that have been filled up and signed in, and all of the events that we have at the smolfair.com site. Round of applause for everybody that participated today. You guys did fabulous. All of the links to the book should be in chat. If they're not, go ahead and dump them in there now so people can go and buy your books. Thank you so much, everybody. Leah, I don't know if you have any closing comments you wanted to make.
No, thank you all for coming. You can get the, we have a SMOLFair sale going on at our website for everything, but you can get the even better sale with the 50% off with the small brunch for the rest of the day, if you decide you want anybody's books through our Square site.
All right.
Yeah, and tonight I'll read a different piece. So if you come back, I'll have to find something else to read so I don't have any repeats.
All right, awesome. Thank you again, everybody, for a fabulous kickoff to SMOLFair. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.